Hello and welcome to Art Block, the show where we talk about art and how it's made. I'm your host Spirit, and today we'll be talking about the horrific nightmare that is art theft and how to avoid it. So it's about time I got to talking about art theft. Art theft is when a person or an entity will take art and either simply claim it as their own or even try to make money off of it. The reason why art theft is such a big deal is that, especially in an online era, there's a lot of opportunities that can lead to art being very easily stolen, especially if it's digital art. Before I discuss some of my tricks to preventing art theft, I do need to mention that there are a couple of types of art theft, as well as a little something called fair use. The two types of art theft I'll be discussing are non-profit and profit-based, which both have their own drawbacks. Non-profit art theft is usually when someone will simply re-upload someone else's art or use their art for a profile pic. This is usually just a grab for attention, or it can sometimes be a person who is new to art who found a piece of art on Google. Profit-based art theft, on the other hand, is when a person or company will attempt to monetize stolen art, usually by putting the art on a product such as a t-shirt or just outright selling prints of it. This is a lot less frequent from what I've observed, but it can be a lot more costly to the artist, especially if the piece of art was a commission. Alternatively, fair use is a case where a creator will use someone else's work in a transformative way. For example, most online film reviews will use clips from the source material to help convey their points more easily. Since this show is primarily about art, I like to use other people's works in order to help boost my points or to provide good examples for others. Admittedly, there's a lot more to fair use, but that rabbit hole is so deep that I'll probably have to cover it in another video. Now that we've got a little bit of an idea of the two categories of art theft, let's talk about some of the ways to prevent and deal with art theft. The first and most obvious way to prevent your art from being stolen online is not to post it. Since you're not providing anyone else easy access to your artwork, then no one will be able to steal it. Of course, if you post your artwork for feedback or because you have an audience, then this option might be out of the question for you. However, if you just make art for yourself, then not posting your work is probably the best form of protection. The next and most common option is to watermark your work. Watermarking is essentially when you take an image of your logo, reduce the opacity, and place it over your piece of art to label it as your art. Websites like DeviantArt also have options to watermark your work by simply checking a box. However, I would personally recommend watermarking your work yourself if you're really worried about your art being stolen or abused. Another less intrusive way to prevent art theft is to include a signature as well as a username at the bottom corner of your piece. This is a great way to show that your artwork is your art without having a watermark plastered over top of the piece. However, do keep in mind that the signature can be easily cropped or edited out if you aren't careful. My recommendation is to find a way to make the image unavailable to download if possible, or to combine the signature with the watermark if you're willing to. My next option for protecting your work is scaling your image file down before uploading it. This way, if your artwork does get stolen, you can provide proof of the original file being much larger, and anyone who steals it is going to have a much smaller file by comparison. Now that we've discussed some ways to prevent art theft, let's talk about how to handle a situation when your art is stolen. In the event of a non-profit scenario, such as someone using your artwork for a profile picture, I would suggest contacting them privately before taking any of the following precautions and just trying to work it out. While this is a case-by-case scenario, there are a lot of times where accidental theft or someone just doesn't know the proper art etiquette, which can lead to a lot of drama if you're not careful. All in all, just be respectful and try to be civil before doing any of the following. Some online hosting websites will offer a flag for copyright or DMCA takedown option in the event of art theft. Since art is the intellectual property of the creator, the artist has every right to file a takedown if the thief hasn't already complied with the artist's requests. In the event that you decide to file a DMCA takedown, be sure to include links to the original file as well as any other information such as the date of the original upload, any links to a potentially larger file, and any data that could support your claim. When you send in your review, whatever platform is hosting the image will usually have a period of 14 to 30 business days depending on the platform to either go through with the takedown or they can decide not to accept the request. In the event of the request being denied or you're dealing with a profit-based theft, there are a couple options that you can turn to depending on the level of the scenario. If you know that the art is your work and you can confirm it, I would suggest contacting a help desk or a higher up on the hosting platform in order to see if you can get the stolen artwork taken down. The last and most extreme step would be to start seeking legal help. This is mostly in cases where a company or more corporate entity is selling your artwork and your business is suffering due to the situation. Keep in mind that proper legal action is an absolute last resort, and you should always balance the outcomes before seeking a lawyer for your artwork. Before we wrap up the video, I wanted to get some of the opinions of my followers on the topic and respond to them just as a way to get your guys' input. The first one is from Ratamieka. Sorry if I'm absolutely butchering that name. They say, complex watermarking or other watermarking will make life miserable for any thief no matter the skill of removing the mark. I can actually see where you're coming from this, as adding a more complex watermark would make it a lot more difficult for a thief to mask it. But at the same time, the question I would like to propose is, when does a watermark become too complex? Personally, I think a watermark should just be a relatively simple logo with the name of the artist under it, since any thief with enough time and patience could probably mask even a really complex watermark with 30 minutes in Photoshop. Robbed Haunt mentions, I noticed some put their username in the bottom corner, or it's subtly incorporated into the work. Whenever you confront a thief, you can use it as your proof. See, while I can agree with you on using a name for proof, as I mentioned before, using the name in a watermark can help provide a higher amount of identity. I do need to point out to the less experienced artists not to make your signature too invasive. I would suggest keeping it either to the bottom left or bottom right corner if possible. Wolfie7111 says, have really bad art. Now, aside from the fact that I feel like this could be a joke, you do actually make a fairly good point. I think a lot of lesser quality art tends to sort of blend into the background, especially on larger websites like DeviantArt and Tumblr. I think one thing that everyone needs to keep in mind is that a lot of artists that get stolen from are usually famous or at professional level, so the impact of art theft on them is usually a lot more substantial considering that their artwork is their job. Bubble Pegasus mentions, when your art is amazing, putting watermarks that are kinda transparent helps. However, if they are going to take it, they will find a way, sadly. But developing your style and making it known will help, because other people might recognize it, you know? I can definitely see where you're coming from on that. If I would make a suggestion with watermarks, I would keep the opacity to at least 25% or lower on the watermark so it isn't too overpowering. As for making your style well known, since most of the cases of art theft, at least that I've seen, come from larger or at least more experienced artists, they're usually lucky enough to have developed a following that is able to spot any cases of theft. There are the unfortunate cases where a theft might go unnoticed, but if it's just some rinky-dink kid reposting a big fish's art and they have like 5 followers, then I don't think an unnoticed theft is really doing much harm. And that's about it for today's episode. If you have any tips or experiences regarding to art theft, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and share this video around. It supports me and is practically free. Also be sure to check me out on Twitter and DeviantArt where I post artwork and interact with you guys outside of the show. Want to help me out behind the scenes? Check me out on Patreon where for as little as $1 a month you can get access to perks and other resources to help you grow your skills. Thank you all for watching, I'm Spirit and I will see you next time.